All right, let's just jump right into it. We're going to talk about the most common UI design mistakes, the ones that don't just hurt your chances, they can get your portfolio rejected on the spot. But more importantly, we're going to cover exactly how to fix them so you can show off your UI the right way. 30. Just 30. You need to burn that number into your brain. Why? Because that's how much time your portfolio probably has before a recruiter makes a decision. That's right, 30 seconds. And look, when they reject a portfolio that fast, it's not because you don't have talent, it's because your UI presentation is sending all the wrong signals about how you think. And we're gonna fix that right now. And here's the harsh truth. A recruiter isn't looking at a button that's a few pixels off and thinking, oh, that's just a small alignment issue. No, they're thinking this person is careless. They're gonna cause problems in our actual live products. Every little UI mistake is seen as a direct reflection of your thinking process. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty, the traps. I like to call these the 7 deadly portfolio sins because these are the common mistakes that lead to that instant rejection we're talking about. All right, sin number 1. And honestly, this is probably the biggest one I see all the time. Showing screens in total isolation. You know the look, just a grid of beautiful but totally disconnected mockups, kind of floating in empty space. And here's where the massive disconnect happens. You think you're showing off these awesome polished designs, right? But what the recruiter sees is, well, nothing. No story. They're asking themselves, okay, when does this screen show up? Why? And if they have to guess, it's a no. Game over. Okay, next up, sin number 2, I call this one dribble thinking. And you probably know exactly what I mean. It's when you're all about those trendy gradients, slick animations, and cool components, but there's absolutely zero reason for any of it. Let me be super clear about this. Hiring managers are not looking for decorators. They hire problem solvers. So when they see this pretty UI without any why behind it, that's a huge red flag. It tells them you're focused on the surface, not the actual substance of the problem. Which brings us right to sin number 3. Which is just a complete and total lack of restraint. This is when a portfolio looks like it exploded. 5 different fonts, a dozen colors, different button styles everywhere. The whole shebang. A beginner might think, hey, the more fonts and colors I use, the more skilled I look. But a pro knows the exact opposite is true. Real product design is about discipline and control. A calm, restrained UI signals maturity. Chaos just signals, well, chaos. Okay, listen up, because this one is so critical. Sin number 4, ignoring states. This means you've only designed the perfect, happy path, and you've completely forgotten about what happens when things go wrong. Error states, empty states, loading states. So why is this one so deadly? Because here's the thing, real-world products, they break all the time. Data doesn't load. Users mess up. So if your portfolio only shows the perfect scenario, a recruiter sees someone who is naive, someone who doesn't get how software really works. To them, you look like a liability, a dangerous hire. All right, sin number 5. This one is a close cousin to that lack of restraint we talked about. Inconsistent components. When the submit button is green on one screen, but then it's blue on another, or the same icon means 2 totally different things. It's just visual chaos. See, consistency is all about trust. It builds trust with your user, for sure. But in a portfolio, it builds trust with the recruiter. It shows you have the discipline to think about scalable systems, not just pretty one-off screens. Sin number 6. Man, this one should be a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how often it gets missed. Just plain bad readability. We're talking basic mistakes like tiny font sizes you can't read or text with super low contrast. And just like before, it's all about what this signals to the reviewer. They're not going to squint and try to imagine it fixed. No, they see a designer who just doesn't get the fundamentals of UX and accessibility. It's an instant next. And that brings us to the final sin, number 7, which kind of ties all of this together. Showing off your final polished UI before you've even explained the problem or the thinking that got you there. Think of it like this. Your gorgeous UI screens, that's the what. But without the why, without the problem you were solving and the process you followed, it all just looks like you were guessing. Recruiters want to hire thinkers, so you have to show them your thinking first. Phew. Okay, so we just went through the 7 deadly sins. And I know that might sound like a lot to worry about. But honestly,
It all boils down to one single super powerful idea. What's the one thing that really separates the amateur portfolios from the professional ones?
Here it is. This is the Bolden Rule. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Your screens are the answers, sure, but the task flow? That's the question. And without the question, the answers are meaningless. They have no context and no value to a recruiter. So, okay, how do we actually do that? How do we put that rule into practice? Let's walk through what I call the Flow First framework. This is the simple structure you can use to show your work like a pro and dodge all 7 of those sins. And listen, the sequence here is everything. You start with the user's goal. Then you show a simple diagram of the task flow. Then, and only then, do you start showing screens, mapping them to each step, and explaining your key decisions. You include those all-important states. And notice, the polished UI comes last. It's the grand finale, not the opening act. And I'm gonna say it again because it's that important. Of all those steps, including states like error and empty states, that's your fastest ticket to looking like a pro. It shows you think about a product as a real thing that lives and breathes, not just a static picture. Seriously, this is not optional if you want to be taken seriously. So what's the real payoff here? Does it actually make a difference? Oh yeah, let's look at a side-by-side because you're about to see how this framework totally transforms the exact same UI screens. Just look at this for a second. The bad version on the left, it's just pretty pictures in a grid. It feels empty, right? But the good version on the right tells a whole story. It starts with the goal, shows the logic, connects the screens to that logic, and even thinks about what happens when things go wrong. The screens didn't change, but their value just went through the roof. So if there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's this. Your UI is not just a piece of artwork. It's a thinking artifact. It's the evidence of how you think. And trust me, that's exactly how it's being judged. And that really just leaves us with one final question, one that I want you to really think about. So after all this, take a good hard look at your own work. Is your portfolio poison right now, accidentally sending all the wrong signals? Or is it proof of the smart, thoughtful, professional designer you really are?